Hey guys, what's up? I'm Erin and welcome back to the channel. So there's this columnist named Quentin, first of all, coolest name ever, and he writes for MarketWatch, and I swear he has the best job ever. People write to him with their extreme money questions or retirement questions, and what a dream job to be fed this constant stream of financial questions. I am totally hooked on his articles. I loved the title of this week's article. Basically, why does nobody write about rich guy early retirement? Essentially, this gentleman wants to know about an early retirement when you've been a high income earner and have built up a substantial net worth. And let me first say that I am happy to talk about retirement in any form. If you want to talk about retiring on modest savings with a solid pension and just Social Security, let's talk about it. If you want to talk about retiring with less than $1 million saved up or more than $1 million saved up, let's talk about it. If you want to talk about retiring abroad, we can do that. I love talking about retirement in absolutely any form. So if you want to talk about rich guy early retirement, let's talk about it. So let's look at this gentleman's details. The annual household income is $300,000 with annual expenses of about $175,000. He's 50 years old and his spouse is 48. They have 3 children. They assume that they will face $100,000 in prep school expenses, plus at least a 4-year undergrad education for each of their children, of which they have $250,000 saved up in 529 plans. As far as a nest egg is considered, they have $3 million in savings and investments, $750,000 in a 401k, and as far as housing, they have a home valued at nearly $3 million with $1.2 million in an outstanding mortgage. The big question this gentleman has is, when is enough enough? As is the case with many want-to-be early retirees, this gentleman is thinking that his years from 50 to 65 are going to be more enjoyable than his years from 65 to 80. So he's exploring the option of perhaps retiring early, spending more time with his family, and enjoying his healthy, robust years. Now, Quentin responds to this letter more from the stance of, do you realize how fortunate you are and how grateful you should be to have this wonderfully high-paying career, to have built up such a robust nest egg at a young age, to have a healthy family? And I agree that all of this is unequivocally true. I think practicing gratitude is one of the most amazing things that any one of us can do to improve our overall life satisfaction. Focusing on all the things we do have rather than the things we don't have or the things we would one day want to have makes a huge difference in our life. And whether or not we want to admit it, I think the vast majority of us have far more things to be grateful for than we could ever imagine. But with all of that being said, I do think we should look at this one from a financial perspective. Assuming this gentleman would like to keep his life the same as it presently is, meaning live in the same house and keep up with his $175,000 in annual expenses, my knee-jerk reaction is to say no, he shouldn't retire yet. This gentleman is clearly an aggressive saver and investor. He's got nearly $3 million in savings and investments, another $750,000 in a 401k, and about $250,000 saved up for his children in a 529 to help pay for education. All of this is amazing, but if he retires at the age of 50, it's most likely that his 401k would not yet be accessible, at least not yet accessible without a penalty. He would have to wait until full retirement age of 59 and a half before he would be able to touch those funds. It does sound like the $3 million he has in savings and investments is in some type of brokerage account, so it does seem that this money would be accessible at an early age. And if you're planning an early retirement, I think this is one of the best accounts you can have. In fact, I would dub this my favorite account, a traditional brokerage account, so much so that I've actually done an entire video on it, and if you're interested in checking it out, I will link that down below. His portfolio in totality, excluding his home, if he were to apply something like a 4% rate of withdrawal, would net him about $150,000 in income for the year. Yes, in those early years of an early retirement, he would be withdrawing a disproportionate share from his brokerage account, but his 401k account at the time should be left invested and left growing. However, I do think if you're retiring at an early age, and 50 is an early age, I think it would be safer to use a more conservative rate of withdrawal, something in the ballpark of 3%, which might net this individual about $113,000 a year. Now remember, his annual expenses are $175,000 a year. Maybe we could explore that his expenses might drop if he were to retire and leave the workforce, but I don't really think they'd drop all that much because keep in mind, this gentleman has 3 young children, and these children are going to come with some pretty hefty educational expenses, and this also might leave more time for activities and more travel, so there's a chance maybe those expenses would even go up. But if we say that his expenses stay consistent at $175,000 a year, if he were to withdraw that amount from his portfolio, I think that would tax his portfolio too much and he would risk running out of money. I do love that he set up a 529 and has $250,000 for his children. That's an amazing start, and let's assume that each of his 3 children go to an in-state public university. 1 year at a public school can easily be $30,000. So for 3 children to complete a 4-year undergrad degree, that could easily be $360,000 in college expenses. Not to mention the fact that he's mentioned that he expects each of his 3 children to complete prep school, which he assumes will cost another $100,000 on top of that. So we're looking at least $460,000 in education-related expenses. That's why I say this $250,000 in a 529 is a great start, but I don't think it's yet sufficient to cover all of these education expenses. I still think it needs time to increase and grow. Also, these are fairly conservative estimates. This is assuming all of the children are going to an in-state public school. What if one or all of the children chooses to go to an out-of-state school or a private school? Those education bills can easily balloon up from there. And when it comes to housing, this gentleman has a home worth roughly $3 million and he still owes $1.2 million on it, and it should be paid off in the next 10 years. Now, I love the idea of going into retirement with a completely paid off home. I don't think it's an absolute must, but I do love the idea of relieving yourself of that debt burden. Now, if someone wants to talk about an early retirement and not a traditional retirement age, I strongly urge them to go into an early retirement with a paid off home. I think there's just more inherent risk. Now, in this case, this gentleman's total outstanding mortgage is roughly the same value as about 25% of his investment portfolio. It's nice that he's locked in a good mortgage rate, but I do think there's more risk involved when you're talking about walking away from your day job and walking away from your paycheck and entering into retirement and still carrying this debt burden. I hugely commend this gentleman for being such a great investor and a builder of wealth, and for the desire to spend more time with his family. But I think walking away from the work world at 50, when you're in your peak expense years, when you have some really big expenses looming over you in the next handful of years, is just a little bit too risky for my taste. And I certainly don't think it has to be an all or nothing situation. This gentleman phrased it as he thinks his better years will be his years from 50 to 65 as opposed to 65 to 80. And there may be truth to that, but just because you don't retire at 50 doesn't mean you have to wait until 65 to retire. And if you're craving more time with your family, there are multiple ways to do this. You don't have to hang up your work hat entirely. Could you negotiate more flex time? Could you negotiate more vacation time? I was recently having this very discussion with my brother, who was expressing the desire to maybe take a little bit more time off work to spend time with his children when they're young. But he immediately followed that up with, well, they're in school. How much time can I actually take off to travel with them because I can't take them out of school for that long? So really, his only option is to take more time off in the summer and create more memories and experiences then. That could be a fit for this gentleman because maybe having every single day off in an early retirement doesn't really do much for spending more time with your children when they're in school 5 days a week, September through June. But if you're able to take more time off in the summer when they're actually home, maybe you could create more memories with them then. I also love that this gentleman phrased it this way: I've been lucky to have a terrific job in finance for the past 25 years. Why I love this so much is that it says to me that he likes what he does. Yes, he's craving more time with his family, but he works in a field he likes. And I think it's really important to find enjoyment in the work you do. I also think if this gentleman were to keep working at his current rate and investing at his current rate, my answer to whether enough is enough might be very different in just 5 years' time. I think it's very reasonable to assume that this family's investment portfolio could grow to about $5.5 million in about 5 years' time. During this time, they could also build up those 529 plans, and 2 of the 3 children would be done or nearly done with prep school, and they'd also make significant headway on their mortgage. So allowing their investment portfolio to build up and getting those 529s in really good shape means that they could be very well positioned to do an early retirement around the age of, say, 55. When it comes to an early retirement, I always love to err on the side of caution. Walking away from the workforce in your 50s very well could mean that you could have 40 or 50 years in retirement. I love the idea of spending more time with your family, but I also love the idea of not living in an environment where you're constantly under financial stress and fearing that you might run out of money, or worse, being forced back into the workspace because of financial duress. I think it's very important to get clear on what your priorities are. Have a solid goal, but remain flexible in your approach. What would you do if you were in this gentleman's shoes? Share your thoughts in a comment down below. I post new videos every single week. If you got anything at all out of this one, please give it a like. If you're new here, please consider subscribing, or if you know of someone who might get something out of this type of content, please consider sharing. I'll see you soon. Bye. I don't know why this is so hard. Did or not? Satisfaction. No. In the wise words of Oprah. I'm sure Oprah has wonderful, wonderful quotes about gratitude, but we're not going to focus on that. I love Oprah. Who doesn't love Oprah? I think prove our life satisfaction. Oh my gosh, I am not grateful for my puppy right now. Peanut. Is the mailman here? What's the problem? It does. Jeez, oh Pete. Done it in. Yes. No. What the frick? To carry them through was a lot. I think we need to rein it in. I think